The Secrets of Doctor Who is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, episode 224.
One day, I shall come back.
That's it. I've been renewed.
Is when a Time Lord's body wears out, he regenerates.
I'm a Time Lord. I'm not a human being. I walk in eternity.
Braveheart.
Change, my dear, and it seems on a moment too soon.
Unlimited rice pudding.
Physician healers. Wearing a bit thin. Fantastic.
I am Scottish. I can complain about things.
Ta-da! Ooh. Should be fine.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series, Doctor Who. And today we're discussing the 11th Doctor story called Night Terrors. Joining me today on the panel are Jimmy Akin. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
And Father Cory Sticha. Hi, Father Cory.
How's it going?
Very well, thanks. Folks, make sure you're following The Secrets of Doctor Who on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, iHeartRadio, your favorite podcast app, or at the SQPN YouTube channel, where you should always hit the bell to get notifications. It's the cloister bell, right? That's what the notifications are. So, yes, we're talking about this 11th Doctor story called Night Terrors, and this is from the second season. It's the mid part of the season. We just got done with a lot of River Song stuff, and now we're kind of moving into a little more of the usual episodic stories, although there's still references to the season-long arc in this one.
This is Matt Fradd's doctor, Matt Smith's doctor. Yeah, Matt Fradd's doctor has the Australian accent, but isn't a stewardess.
Now that I would watch.
That'd be funny. No, Matt Smith's doctor, and it's the second Matt Smith season.
Yeah. My recollection of this episode before I rewatched it was I didn't like it very much. Mm-hmm. But now, rewatching it, I think I like it a little more. But what do you guys think of this episode?
Father?
I'm kind of in the middle on it. I like the fact that it is more or less a just standalone story. When I was looking at the TARDIS wiki, they mentioned the episode "Fear Her," which of course is the episode we pan with good reason. And I think that's a good comparison to make, other than the idea that there are children involved and people are disappearing. They're also really not that great of episodes, but it's just kind of a redone of that story.
I thought that it was a little bit of a going over some familiar ground as well. I agree. Jimmy, what do you think?
I have almost never seen this one. I mean, I saw it when it first came out, and I didn't like it, and so I haven't rewatched it, regularly since then. It's, I'm sure, been years since I've seen this. And so I'd forgotten basically everything except that it was about a little boy and I didn't like it. And it's about a little boy and I didn't like it.
So we should kind of recap what the story is as we go. Before we go through it, I should mention that it was written by Mark Gatiss, who is Stephen Moffat's writing partner on many things, including Doctor Who.
Many of which are better than this.
Most of which are better. And the theme is, once again, the Doctor's empathy toward kids. That the fact that the Doctor is seeking out and helping children. We see this a lot. We've seen this, like you said, in Fear Her. We saw this with Amelia Pond and and I think it's a sort of a BBC theme for New Who, especially in the Matt Smith era. The idea of the Doctor, because it's a show aimed at, they consider it a family show aimed at kids, that sort of thing. So I thought that was interesting. But the main idea, the recap, the synopsis is the Doctor gets a message on the psychic paper from a boy that in London saying, "Save me." He lives in the council flats, and it says, "Save me from the monsters."
Save me from the monsters. The kid is terrified of unseen monsters. His mother has a ritual where she turns on and off the light 5 times, and they put mentally anything he's afraid of in a cupboard. but he's clearly not well adjusted, and his parents are very concerned about him. As his mom is going off to work, she says that he needs a doctor, and so when the doctor shows up, his father assumes that he's been sent by like public health authorities, and the doctor tries to help the kid. Meanwhile, Amy and Rory disappear, as does a neighbor lady and the landlord, and strange stuff happens, and eventually parental love solves everything.
Right. Yeah, they get sucked basically into the cupboard, into the wardrobe, and which is another wardrobe-related one we don't really like, but or at least I don't really like. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I don't really like that one.
Their version of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah. Okay, so but they get sucked into the dollhouse that's in the cupboard.
Right.
That's where Amy and Rory and the landlord and they get changed into peg dolls in the meantime. That's the part of this episode I was least favorable toward. The weird turning into peg dolls. I know you've got to have some sort of peril, some sort of problem that the doctor has to solve. But I don't know. I thought the whole peg doll thing was weird, and I didn't get it.
I like the idea of that they got basically shrunk down and put into the dollhouse. I thought that was kind of a interesting idea, or a neat idea. I can't say interesting, but a neat idea. Especially when they're trying to, they're going around the house and it looks like this, old mansion, Victorian style mansion, and everything is made of wood, including the frying pan and the chicken.
Right.
And I thought that was kind of a neat idea. But yeah, the idea that if the peg dolls catch you, you get turned into one. And, there were 4 or 5 of them. So, and we saw 3 people get changed. So I wonder who else had gotten sucked into this place that we didn't know about. Of course, they don't really talk about that at all. There just happens to be more peg dolls than there were people we saw on screen getting turned into one.
Are these things actually peg dolls? Because I've just looked up peg dolls on the internet since I'm not familiar with them, and they seem to be dolls that are made out of pegs. And these are wooden dolls, but they're articulated. They have arms they can grab you with and things like that.
Everything I saw online referred to them as peg dolls, but I'm no expert, so I'll go with wooden dolls or peg dolls. Yeah, it is kind of weird either way. Yeah, and you're right, Father Cory. There is these extra dolls in there, and we don't know, like, who are they? Why are they? That is the big hole in this story. Is we have a lot about the origins of Georgie, the little boy, who is really a doppelganger alien. That sort of story, but we don't understand. There's no explanation of how the mechanics, the mechanism.
They eventually give us one. It's that, but why don't we actually save that? Let's talk about where the show starts going wrong, which is the beginning.
Okay.
So, this is meant to be a horror-themed episode. So this should work like a little horror movie. And horror movies can be slow-moving. There are slow-burn horror movies that are very effective. But this isn't one of them.
Yeah.
It's boring. So I have in my notes there, we have this initial opening sequence with the boy and the mom. The boy's name is George, and she's trying to get him to go to sleep, but he's just scared of everything. And it's not obvious why. There's nothing here to establish why this kid is afraid. And so we were given nothing objective. We're just shown a lot of stuff with camera work from his point of view that's meant to suggest scary things, none of which are actually scary. Then he sends this telepathic message out into space, which the doctor gets on the psychic paper, and the doctor shows up, and the doctor, Amy, and Rory start going around. I think they're called council flats in England. Here we'd call it like a development project.
Yep.
Yeah.
Public housing, but they're going around knocking on all these people's doors. So they've piloted their way all the way through the universe to this housing project, but they don't know which apartment that the kid is in. And so they split up, and Rory's knocking on doors, and Amy's knocking on doors, and the doctor's knocking on doors, and they keep meeting people who are not the right people. And this is meant to be funny. because we have all these awkward interactions between them and the apartment dwellers, and none of it's funny.
Mm-hmm.
Then Amy and Rory get in an elevator and have a falling experience and vanish. And then we see a little old lady go out to take the garbage out, and she gets sucked into a trash pile, or a pile of garbage bags anyway. Mm-hmm. And then Amy and Rory wake up in an old house, and there are no lights. Fortunately, Rory has a flashlight, but they find a wooden pan that's been painted to look like a copper pan, and a lamp that they can turn on. It's like an electric lantern, only it's really big and weird looking and kind of old-fashioned-y. And then they open a drawer, and there's a giant glass eye, which they touch and realize this is just a glass eye. It's not somebody's actual eyeball. And as soon as they found the glass eye, I said, they're in a dollhouse.
Mm-hmm.
That's the explanation for all these things. Then the doctor finally finds the dad and bluffs his way in to see George, pretending to be from child services or something. And he has a bunch of back and forth with the dad. The unsympathetic landlord comes over with his dog to collect the rent while the doctor is entertaining George with his sonic screwdriver. And it becomes obvious to the doctor that George is very afraid of the cupboard. And so at first he was going to just open the cupboard, but then he scans it with the sonic screwdriver. And at the 19-minute mark, okay, so the episode is almost half over. At the 19-minute mark, the doctor freaks out because the readings he's getting from the sonic about the cupboard are, in his words, off the scale.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, finally, something, there's something here that I found emotionally engaging. The fact that the doctor is afraid of the cupboard now because its readings are off the scale, that's interesting. The problem is we're 19 minutes into the episode.
Yeah.
And we then have the doctor debating with the father, should we open this cupboard or not? And at first the doctor is like, oh, of course we should. And he gets hysterical talking about how of course we should. And then he turns around and gets hysterical talking about of course we shouldn't. And the scene falls flat because the doctor, this is just Matt Smith in spastic panic mode, arguing both sides of a case. And it's just filling time. It's not advancing the plot. So then we get to the 27-minute mark, and the episode is now 2/3 over, when the doctor has been saying for a while, I'm missing something. Something's right in front of me, and I'm not seeing it. What is it? And we get one of the Matt Smith doctor flashbacks to him looking at a family photo album. And in the photo album, it's like when George was born, which was like Christmas 8 years ago. Only in the pictures before the birth, his mother, Claire, isn't pregnant. And he forces the father, whose name you don't really care about, to admit something he himself has forgotten, which is Claire can't have kids.
Right.
And it's like, why did I forget that? Claire can't have kids. And as soon as he says Claire can't have kids, I say in my notes, cuckoo's nest. Because that's exactly what George is. He's a cuckoo. The doctor even later uses that word.
Right.
And so for folks who may not be aware, cuckoos are birds. They don't build their own nests. Instead, what they do is they go to the nests of other birds, kick out the eggs of the other birds, and lay their own egg there. So they're what are called brood parasites. They get other birds to raise their own young. And their own young grow fast and big in case there are other competitor eggs still left in the nest. So they outcompete the birds that they're replacing. So they're these little invasion of the body snatcher doppelganger birds. And that's what George is. He's a cuckoo. Eventually, the doctor gives a science fiction name. He says he's from a race called the Tenza that really want to fit in. Their parents psychically hone in on needy parents who I guess can't have kids and then give them one. And then the Tenza child grows up to be the perfect member of whatever society it's in. And okay, we're 27 minutes into the episode. The first 27 minutes are basically boring with a few flashes of interest.
Well, it's all snappy dialogue, right? That's what we're treated to is the snappy dialogue and the funny repartee. Except it's not really enough. I mean, that stuff is great.
It doesn't work because they're trying to mix it with horror, and the horror is not horrific.
Right. It's like having a meal and you don't get an entree, you're just getting the condiments. And that's what that reputation, that dialogue should be a condiment to the story, the plot, the actual events. I agree with that. Well, there isn't much there.
And then, of course, what little action and problem solving there is in the last 15 minutes.
Oh, maybe even less than that, right?
I mean, even less than that. I mean, of course, you still
running around.
But there's still a lot of running around. Yeah, like you said, but it's just it really is just kind of a meh episode because there's I love it where Rory goes, "We're dead again."
That was fun. When they first wake up in the house, he thinks he and Amy may be dead again.
You know, but it's just like, okay, give us a couple good one-liners. Mark Gatiss is good at that, but
yes,
that's it.
So let's talk about some of the things that might have been, good little bits, like you mentioned. Like, the little boy is cute. Let's just be honest. He's really good at what he does. He's great at looking scared and cute. And I'll be honest, at 8 years old, he looks like my son was like my son at 8 years old. So there was I think I'm a little biased in favor there. But there's a scene where where Amy and Rory, just before they're sucked into the cupboard, they're walking past Georgie's window, and that's where Rory says, maybe we should let the monsters gobble him up. And that's apparently the trigger for why George is afraid of them and thus thrust them into the cupboard. That's something I didn't notice on the first watch through. Another thing that was interesting was the dad is watching TV. It turns out he's watching BBC One on Saturday night, which is when Doctor Who airs. So or at the time. So I thought that was a nice thing. What else was there?
That kind of says a lot.
I know. I'm just looking at my notes, and the doctor says he's got this long. It was this long thing about monsters are real, and he talks to Alex. It wasn't all that great. But there is actually one thing I want to mention. So he says when he's talking to George, he says, "When I was your age, I loved a good bedtime story." And he mentions 3: the 3 Little Centaurans, the Emperor Dalek's New Clothes, and Snow White and the 7 Keys to Doomsday.
Yeah,
that's a reference to an old a classic Who story, right? The 7 Keys to Doomsday, right?
It is a reference to elsewhere in the mythos. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I thought that was. I would like to see those actually as good storybooks. Those would be good.
Price what he has, and of course,
there is a Time Lord's bedtime storybook.
There is. Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I have to find that. So another element to this to point out is that this is a nobody dies episode, even though it's a horror themed episode. So nobody dies, everybody recovers, everybody comes back to the way they were.
They have to, because otherwise the little kid would have been the one to kill them.
Exactly. That would really be horrible. You wouldn't be able to do that.
You get the poor little old lady who wakes up in the trash pile and trying to figure out what happened. Oh, must have been the medication she took that caused her to pass out in the trash pile.
Lady, what medication are you taking? So the doctor says the scariest place in the universe is a child's bedroom, which maybe my kids' bedrooms, but that's for the mess. But
one thing I will say, I did like the effects of the shadows and everything, because of course that's all of us who were kids, when we were kids, we had shadows we were afraid of, and it was kind of effective where they would set up the toys so the shadow would look like a dinosaur or something like that, a monster coming or something like that. Because everybody's had those moments where a shadow just catches them wrong or whatever. I mean, that was effective. I mean, it wasn't interesting, but it was effective at least.
Yeah.
I think we're struggling on this one.
I'm struggling to have more to say, but
well, I'm holding back, about the end game. I kind of summarized how we get up to the end game. But then so in the house, we have a bunch of creeping around with Amy and Rory at first, and then they discover a doll, which is, for the listener who hasn't seen this, the dolls are like roughly human sized, maybe a little shorter. They're made out of wood. They look creepy.
Oh yeah.
These are not attractive children's dolls. These are pretty creepy children's dolls. And at first they think, oh, it's just a dummy. And then they encounter, and Rory like thunks it on its wooden head. And then later they encounter the landlord who has been sucked into the dollhouse as well, because he had come to collect the rent and he was very menacing to George's dad, whose name doesn't matter. And he went back up to his apartment and was watching TV himself with his dog, and he got sucked through the carpet. Yep. And him getting sucked through the carpet is nice. It's a good visual effect. He ends up in the dollhouse. Amy and Rory encounter him as he's being chased by these wooden dolls who are like, come, we want to play, don't run away, stuff. And they grab him, and then he becomes a doll. And so then Rory and Amy are trying to evade the dolls, but they end up getting Amy, and she becomes a doll. And so Rory is left alone. Eventually, when the doctor and the father, whose name doesn't matter, open the cupboard, George wills them into the, I almost said cornfield, into the dollhouse. And so now they're down there with Rory, and the doctor is piecing together what's happened. He realizes that this is all being produced by George, and something must have happened to cause this, that there's like a psychological feedback loop happening here, and he needs to figure out what the initiating trigger was. And it turns out, based on another Matt Smith flashback, that it was the parents speculating, apparently at some point in the past, which we didn't see, they had speculated maybe we'll call a doctor and he'll need to take George away, like to a mental health facility. And because George is a Tenza, the thing he wants to do most of all, his biological evolutionary imperative, is to fit in. And so the idea of being rejected by his parents is the worst thing imaginable to a Tenza child. And so that's what has caused George to become afraid of everything, because he's afraid he's going to be rejected by his foster parents and be taken away. And that represents evolutionary failure for him. And so the doctor manages to talk George. He's trying to talk George down and say, look, it's you this is something that you can control. You're causing this. You need to make it stop. You need to face your fear, all this kind of stuff. And that works well enough to get George down into the dollhouse himself, at which point the dolls start going after George. And the dad then saves the day because he declares his love for his son, and no matter what else is the case, even though he's not a human, you're still my son. And parental magic is the solution. This is a power of love. This is a cheap power of love situation. Now, I have nothing at all against stories where parents save children, and that's the solution to the drama. That's fine. But I think showing parental love is a great thing in ordinary cases, where it's the love that motivates the parents to solve the problem. What I find cheap are solutions where the parents' love itself magically dispels the problem.
Yeah.
This is something I've seen in multiple different kinds of fiction. It's even in Harry Potter. And I always find it cheap and saccharine, where you have this just express your love and all the problems melt away. Mm-hmm. That's cheap writing. And so I find this episode as having a cheap solution. And then, now that the psychic spell is broken, we have the "and it was all a dream" ending.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Everyone's back in their places, and George and Dad and the doctor are making pancakes when Mom comes home, and
with Kipper.
George is and George is magically better, and everything is fine. We go on. You're right about that whole, like, the love being the solution as opposed to the motivator to find a solution. It feels like this episode's ending is just rushed. It's just sort of plopped on. See, this is the template, right? Love is it, and we're on. We're done. Yep. And it's like the dad, there's no cost to that love. There's no cost to the dad, really. apart from having to admit that I'm going to be okay with being a dad to
An alien.
a kid who's an alien baby, an alien kid. And it's like, but there's no cost. He doesn't have to give anything. He doesn't have to do anything. It's not like Taken, where Liam Neeson has to go and rescue his daughter and fight the bad guys. He doesn't have to fight the peg dolls even, or what the wooden dolls here.
Oh, come on, Dom. He has to masculinely brush past them.
Exactly.
Right.
Push one out of the way a little bit.
Yeah. You're right. You're right. It would be better if there were more the dad had to do.
I will say, for some of the complaints we've had with Modern Who, it is good that the dad is portrayed in a good light as, as a good father figure, as someone who cares for his son. I mean, both parents really. Of course, Claire is basically, she's there in the beginning and then goes to work and comes back at the end after work, so we really don't see her. But the fact is, both parents are presented in a very good light. And it's we've had a lot of complaints in the past Doctor Who, especially during the Russell T Davies era, about parents being mothers, especially, but parents being portrayed very negatively. So it's let's give credit where credit due. They actually show parents well in this one.
Yeah. Also, later in the Stephen Moffat era, like during the 12th Doctor's time, we have what's up with Bill's mom and her foster mom.
Right.
And it's interesting the flipping of the script a little bit, where it's the dad who's at home because he doesn't have a job, and the mom's at work. But I like seeing dads in relationships with their kids. I like that in a positive way. And you're right. He's a good dad. He's not a perfect dad. He's got his problems, but he's a good dad. I do like that. That is one of the things I like about this. So you're right. That's a positive here. I do want to point out at the very end, as they are wrapping up on the TARDIS, we hear the dolls singing their nursery rhyme again. Over it's sort of voiceover.
Tick tock goes the clock, even for the Doctor, and they show us the Lake Silencio graphic.
Right, that's our reference to the season arc. So I'm not sure whether that's supposed to be the dolls are still existing. I don't know. I don't want to put too much thought into that.
No, it's just it, and they'll bring that kind of nursery rhyme back as we get closer to the series. But it's non-diegetic. It's just the showmakers winking at the audience and reminding us this is still out there.
It's like the crack always showing up in every episode last season.
That's true.
It's the same idea as they got to make sure they add some. By the way, we're still doing the story arc. It's still there.
Right.
And that's one actually. There are some people who complained about those recurring elements being intrusive, and in this case, I agree. I don't see how it really adds anything.
Mm-mm.
Right.
Well, it was just tacked on the last 3 minutes of the episode just to put it there.
Anything else that needs to be said about Night Terrors?
One thing that I kind of thought about as I was watching the first half of this episode is how it would compare to Classic Who. Because in Classic Who, you could have episodes that were slow moving, but, so I was like thinking, how would this play with Ian and Barbara and Susan, for example? And because they could have really relaxed pace in some episodes, but it still was more interesting than this, I thought. There's something about this that doesn't work, because horror is meant to be high tension, whereas just relaxing by a Roman, fireplace and talking about being in Rome for 5 minutes. Okay, that's just local color. It's not meant to be high tension. But watching a little kid have night terrors is meant to be high tension, and when it's not, it just falls flat.
Right. What's the one that's later where it has the lump in the middle of the bed? The one with Danny Pink?
Hush.
Hush,
or
right.
Listen.
I mean, that... Is it Hush?
Maybe it's Listen. One of the two.
But that one had real tension and fear and jeopardy and involved the kid and that sort of thing, and that was more effective.
And the thing too is with this high tension, it doesn't necessarily have to be high action. You can have there's some excellent psychological thrillers. I mean, watch some of Hitchcock's stuff. There's not a lot of action in it.
Or watch Wait Until Dark with Audrey Hepburn. That is awesome. I mean, it is really awesome, and it is not. There's very little action in it, but it is really frightening.
You still got to have something to, again, the doctor sitting there making tea with Alex, the dad. It's just like, okay, this is really exciting.
Yeah, right. And then just having, again, witty repartee. Yeah, you're right. So I think we're agreed on this. Not terrible, not great.
No. Terrible.
Okay.
See, that's
okay.
I'm willing to give him the it's meh.
Okay. Yeah. All right. No, that's right, Jimmy. You said earlier, yeah, that it's not good. So I would say there are aspects of it I like.
Yeah, and I would agree with that.
But there's much of it I don't like, I guess.
And by the way, one thing you mentioned at the beginning, Jimmy, where you didn't remember this episode, I remember thinking that too, actually, when I watched it last night. I went, why do I not remember this episode? As I'm pulling it up on the list on the screen, it's like, why do I not remember this episode? And then, of course, watch is like, oh, that's why. It's forgettable.
Yeah, it is forgettable. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I had forgotten much about it, too. All I remember was the dolls and how creepy they were. But that was it. All right. I think that's enough on Night Terrors. We can put this one to bed. See what I did there?
I see that, yes.
So as we wrap things up, I do want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create The Secrets of Doctor Who, including Benjamin B., Kathleen F., Tom L., Daniel D., and Kelly B. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue The Secrets of Doctor Who and all the shows at StarQuest. Now's a great time to become a StarQuest patron, thanks to a generous gift from a supporter who is going to match by an equal amount your gift for the first 3 months. That will support all our shows, including this one, and make sure your gift go even further. And we're more than halfway to our goal of $2,000 in new monthly pledges, which we need to do in order to accomplish some things for the network and for the show. So won't you help us close the gap? If you've been thinking of becoming a StarQuest patron, now's the time. Visit sqpn.com/give today. And thank you to Victor Lambs, who, once again, edits the show for us every week. So what do you think of Night Terrors? If you have a better opinion of it than we do, or you have an idea that we missed, let us know by commenting at sqpn.com or the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page, or send an email to drwho@sqpn.com. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the 7th Doctor story, The Greatest Show in the Galaxy. Until then, Father Cory Sticha, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Doctor Who.
Thanks, Tom, and very appropriate to end on a dad joke.
Yes, it is. Jimmy Akin, thank you as well.
Thank you, and sweet dreams.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest. And remember, pantophobia. Not a fear of pants, though, if that's what you're thinking. It's a fear of everything, including pants. I suppose in that case.
Right. This is going to be fun.